Chrissy, I'm going to go a little bit off topic here and just let the listeners know that I have been reading a newspaper since I was in third grade here in Orlando. Long time.
Mm-hmm.
And just to remind the listeners, too, that Orlando was a small town back then. And I would come home from school and I'd read the newspaper, and there were certain articles that were cut out. I didn't think anything about it until many years later when I was adult, and I was talking to my mom one time. She goes, yeah, Tom, there were scandals happening in people that you knew in our neighborhood. And those scandals, I would cut those articles out so you wouldn't see them.
I give your mom credit for one. Well, okay, you are one of four kids. Okay, so let's
Yes.
just start with this. You are one of four children, and you are the only one that was reading the Orlando Sentinel.
Yes.
Okay. So then, therefore, then your mom knew you were reading it. You were the only one of your siblings. And she had the wherewithal to say, hey, that's great that my son is in third grade and reading the Orlando Sentinel, but I want to make sure that he's not seeing these scandals. And she cut them out so you're reading the paper with those holes. I just think that's adorable.
And I still read the newspaper this day. For me to get up early and find the newspaper on my driveway and sit
You
and read it
love
with a
it.
cup of coffee, I do love it. And I hope that they will continue to be willing to throw that newspaper on my driveway. And someday
For
I
a long
understand,
time.
maybe they won't, and I'll have to look at it on an iPad or something. But in the meantime, I love reading the newspaper. This story was going somewhere, but we're going to have to take a break. We're going to come to the other side of the break, and we'll continue to talk about this. Hey, folks, now, Chris, before the break, we were talking about how I've been reading the Orlando Sentinel newspaper since third grade. Continue to read it. It's one of the joys of my life is to wake up in the morning and have a cup of coffee and read the newspaper, and hey, I love it. So back when I was a kid, it was Dear Abby, and people like us,
Right.
they would, like me at least, they would remember Dear Abby. And
Absolutely.
I'm going way off script now, but one thing I always remember about Dear Abby was that she was one of the first people to say out loud and in public and in the newspaper that being gay is not a disease. Being gay used to be defined as a disease, as in cancer is a disease. And she was the first one to step out and say, no, it's not a disease. It occurs in billions of people. There are going to be some people that are gay, okay? And then she was taken over by her sister, Ann Landers.
Okay.
And now the daily advice column is Ask Amy.
Okay.
And every once in a while I write Ask Amy a question.
Okay.
And I find it really a hoot when she puts my questions in the newspaper, and I show all the family members my
yes.
question that I wrote in, and
Yes.
what her answer was. And
Right.
just fun stuff, really.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So where I'm leading to with this is that this morning there was an article in there, and
Okay.
a lady wrote in. She said, Tom, I just found out that somebody in my neighborhood is a sex offender.
Oh.
Should I be telling my neighbors this information? And, of course, hey, what's Ask Amy going to say? And the bottom line was she says, look, first confirm, and if this is true, absolutely you should be telling your neighbors. And Ask Amy, she told me, I didn't know this, but you can Google National Registry of Sex Offenders. Just Google that. It'll take you to a government website. You put in your address, and you can put whatever kind of periphery you want. And I put in a 1 mile. I think that's the default. As to all the sex offenders in our neighborhood or
Got it.
within 1 mile, as the crow flies, you might say.
Okay.
Oh, my God. Was that a shocker to see how many there were. Now, specifically, there is a condominium association within 1 mile, not nearby, but this is as a crow flies, okay, but it's within our 1 mile border. This condo was full of registered sex offenders. They must all be getting together and saying, okay, here's a place where you can live, because there's certain places they can't live
Exactly.
within school zones and so forth, or it was full of them. I mean, we're talking in a condo association, there must have been 30 of them lined up, neighbor, all sex offenders.
So I think, too, for the listeners out there, you should tell them that website.
I'll Google it and give them the website. But it is, if you Google National Registry Sex Offenders website, you're going to find it.
Okay. But say that again.
National Registry of Sex Offenders
Website.
website.
Okay.
You're
And
gonna
then
find
you
it.
can put in your address. And then it's going to give you within a radius any that may be known in your area, just so then our listeners out there would know how to find this information themselves.
It gives you names, photographs,
And information.
address, what their sex offense was. And
Very important.
very important. And so that led me to ask you, okay, we know this condominium. We know it. We drive by it. It's a 2-story and full of sex offenders, okay? Why they're all congregating in this particular condominium complex, I'm not sure. Maybe it's a safe zone for them. But it raised a question to me, and that is this, is that if you own a condo in that association and you want to sell this condo, would you be required to disclose to a buyer that it's full of sex offenders?
Well, I think it's a really great question, and it's a question for one, as the owner, what are you legally obligated to do, and or as the realtor,
Yeah.
if you know that. So, and we don't know, we would have to ask a realtor, certainly what they say, because isn't it interesting? We everything that we know about real estate and that, I don't know, we don't know that answer.
We know that in the state of Florida, as far as the selling real estate, it used to be a buyer beware state. Didn't have to disclose anything. We have come 180 degrees to where you must now disclose anything and everything that material affects the value of this piece of property.
And would that be considered?
I'm thinking it does, okay? If you got a condo in there that's worth $200,000 and you try and sell it for $200,000 and you disclose to your buyer, by the way, this complex is full of sex offenders, I don't think it's worth $200,000 anymore.
Right, I agree.
So maybe maybe ignorance is bliss in this situation. But my initial reaction is that if you know it, then you're obligated to disclose it. What it might also be interesting for people to know is that, okay, if you're buying a piece of property, maybe you go check the address of the property that you're buying and seeing what's going on in your neighborhood.
Absolutely.
We have a very quiet, quaint neighborhood that's kind of defined by boundaries of major roads and so forth. So it's considered its own little neighborhood in itself. And within our own little neighborhoods itself, sure enough, there was one. And that I'm not overly concerned, but I don't think it affects the value of our piece of property. But still, it just lets you know that, man, they're out there.
Absolutely, and it occurred to me as you were saying this as well, what responsibility, if any, is there to HOAs or condo associations?
Yeah.
Because California has the most HOAs.
Okay.
Florida, number 2. We have so many HOAs in Florida, house and condo. Is there any responsibility on there as well?
I think when you talk about a neighborhood of traditional homes that they have an HOA, to sell your home to somebody, I don't think it requires any kind of approval from this neighborhood full of traditional homes that has an HOA. If you're buying a condo in a building that has an HOA, I do believe that you got to get permission and approval of the buyer that's coming in. And so the question is, on those HOAs in the condo buildings, are they doing background checks looking for the same thing?
Correct.
That would be interesting to know. And by the way, when you go to the website, and I know this is all kind of lurid and maybe off topic a little bit, but the one that happens to be living in our neighborhood, it literally says on there, convicted of soliciting sex with a minor child over the computer. I mean, it gives you that kind of detail about it. And if we had young kids, I would be concerned.
Well, I think very important information for the public to have.
Okay. So
Yes.
again, if you just out of your idle curiosity, you want to know what's going on in your neighborhood, if you just Google National Registry of Sex Offenders website, it is a government website, because I think most people know, but they probably forget that if you're a convicted sex offender, you are required to register with this registry.
It's part of their.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you can go in and you can check it out yourself and see what's going on, hopefully not too close to your house. All right.